Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds signed a new law into bill targeting critical race theory that is eliminating some of the curriculum that wanted to be taught in Iowa schools. So this story is interesting. We're going to take a look at the bill. It goes into effect on July 1, and it's called House File 802. Not a huge bill, but we are going to look at it and see what it does, because you may be seeing this come to a state near you, hopefully. And we'll see what it actually does mechanically on the ground level with the schools in Iowa. So we're going to start by going and doing a little bit of background here from the Hawkeye, which is, I guess, the name of a website from the Des Moines Register here. It says the Iowa governor signs a law that is targeting critical race theory, saying she's against discriminatory indoctrination. All right. So we're going to take a look at this, and then I want to show you something that's happening in medicine, because we're seeing this kind of concept of critical race theory permeate its tentacles into all different facets of our life. Right now, we're talking about schools, but next we're going to talk about medicine. We just talked about, if you missed the last segment, how social goals may be working their way into economic policy. Now let's go back to the schools and see where we're at. So Kim Reynolds signs a new law that's going to target the teaching of CRT in government and other concepts in government diversity trainings in classroom curriculum. All right, here's what she says. She says, critical race theory is about labels and stereotypes, not education. It teaches kids that we should judge others based on race, gender, sexual identity, rather than the content of someone's character. Oh, I love that line. Reynolds said, and that is, it's such a good line, content of someone's character. It has that nice alliteration, right? Content of someone's character. It's beautiful. Reynolds said in a statement, I'm proud to have worked with the legislature to promote learning, not discriminatory indoctrination. This article says, this is not my commentary, this article says critical race theory is a decades-old legal theory that examines how slavery's legacy continues to influence American society. It is not specifically named in the new legislation, but the law would ban teaching certain concepts such as that the U.S. or Iowa is systemically racist. Okay. Sometimes they say systematically, but they got it right here. Systemically racist. Okay. So it goes into effect on July 1. Reynolds' signing comes after other Republicans across the country have said they want to eliminate this. Iowa is among more than a dozen states that have considered legislation this year aimed at eliminating similar concepts. Opponents have said that the efforts would likely discourage important conversations about racism and sexism. The Iowa legislation faced opposition from Democrats, a variety of groups like ACLU, Iowa, Nebraska, NAACP. Opponents criticized Iowa as the law is vague and subjective. And so, you know, on this type of stuff, right, the ACLU is going to come out here and they're going to say, well, this is sort of, you know, putting limitations on free speech. What happens if a teacher wants to speak about these things? And it's going to turn into a whole free speech mess. You know, in these types of situations, I tend to think that locally is the best solution on stuff like this, so that individual schools, individual school districts, they get to decide what to do with their kids. You know, so, you know, well, I'll say, you know, well done, Iowa, for standing back up to this, to some of this stuff. You know, maybe there is a segment in Iowa where they do want to teach that stuff. And I don't really, you know, have a problem with that, honestly. If parents want to send their kids to a CRT school, I guess they should have the freedom to do that, right? Just like we should say we have the freedom to send our kids to other schools. You know, I don't have kids, by the way, so maybe I should just shut up and keep reading the story. According to Washington Post, most teachers don't specifically refer to critical race theory in the classroom, but some lessons do reflect some of its themes, such as the existence of systemic racism. So here's what the law will ban. It's going to ban the teaching the ideas that the U.S. or the state of Iowa is fundamentally or systemically racist or sexist. Can't teach that an individual, by virtue of race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, either consciously or unconsciously. And they cannot teach that anyone, quote, should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress because of the race of one's race or sex. Okay. It will also ban any form of race or sex stereotyping or race or sex scapegoating. Race or sex stereotyping is defined as ascribing character traits. We're going to read all of that here in a minute. The measure prohibits school and college employees from discriminating against students or employees based on political ideology, along with protected characteristics outlined in federal civil rights law. School and college training must also discourage students from this kind of discrimination. All right. So the bill applies to classroom instruction, mandatory diversity training for state and local government employees. It would not ban teachers or instructors from answering questions about those concepts, and it would not prevent teachers from discussing them as part of a larger course of study. Okay, so there you go. There's a little bit of flexibility there. Iowa's new law, in parts, draws nearly word for word from a Trump administration executive order that targeted critical race theory. Joe Biden rescinded that order in January. Yeah, well, Governor Reynolds just put it right back there, Joe. So what do you think about that? Here is her signing statement here from the office of the governor. So we'll notice this came a couple days ago, June 8th. The Honorable Paul Potty, Secretary of State of Iowa, she's saying, hey, listen, I hereby transmit that House File 802, an act providing for requirements related to racism or sexism trainings and diversity, is hereby approved on this date. Signed it into law. This is what it looks like. So when we read through some of these, we're looking for really, the general framework when it comes to, legislation is, I always kind of look at the size of this thing. It's not very long. You can see this is it. We just went through the whole thing. We also can see there's sort of a definitions section here. So we have race or scapegoating means the same thing as defined elsewhere. So they're pointing us to different areas of the law. Government entity means what you think it means. Agency, so on and so forth. Let's see. Each agency prohibits, so subsection 3, each agency, entity, subdivision shall prohibit its employees from discriminating against other employees by any characteristic protected under the Civil Rights Act. It's like, why do we have to say that, Section shall not be construed to do any of the following, so don't overread it. We have a new section here. They're giving us some more definitions about race and sex scapegoating. Race or sex stereotyping. Let's see what this means. So race or sex scapegoating. What does that mean? It means assigning fault, blame, or bias to a race or sex, or to members of a race or sex because of their race or sex. Or, so that's one definition, or it's claiming that consciously or unconsciously, and by virtue of a person's race or sex, members of the race are inherently racist, or they are inherently inclined to oppress others, or that members of the race are inherently sexist or inclined to oppress others. So you can't blame, you can't assign blame, fault, or bias based on race or sex. So you can't say that anything that somebody did was a consequence of one of those things. That's white privilege, like, gone. You can't use that anymore, right? Wow, it's powerful. No more white privilege. That's a big one, because that one, the white privilege attack, it defeats a lot of arguments. Because if you say anything, they just use that to beat you over the head with it. You say, well, I think that's inappropriate, and they say, well, of course you would, because you're a white person. You grew up with white privilege, and you have no idea what it's like to be in that person's shoes. And we go, oh, I guess you're right about that. I guess we can't talk at all about anything. But this law says that they can't assign fault, blame, or bias to race or sex. So when I say to somebody, hey, I think that might be a problem, that policy issue might need a correction, and they say, that's because you're a white, I go, up, illegal. Governor, we got a lawbreaker over here accusing me of white privilege. That is in violation of the law. So good for Iowa. Now, same thing goes on with race or sex stereotyping. Means ascribing character traits or values or morals or ethical codes or privileges or statuses based on sex or race. This is the dumbest world we're living in here. I got to be honest. Now, not that this bill is dumb. It's just this idea that we have to talk about this is like insane to me. I thought it was the content of your character that was important. Now it's all about race. Like, you can't even, like, you have to tell people that they can't blame you for your opinion on your race. Okay, so this is a law now. This is in law. So that meritocracy or trait such as hard work ethic. So they're also saying, oh no. So specific defined concepts. Let's see. This includes all of the following. That one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. So they're saying that you can't talk or you can't teach specific defined concepts. That an individual should be discriminated against or received adverse treatment based on their race or sex. that individuals should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other forms of psychological distress on account of their race or sex. That meritocracy or traits like hard work ethic are racist or sexist, or were created by a particular race to oppress another race. All right, we've seen a lot of that. Like hard work and, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is somehow like a white supremacist thing. What? Any other form of race or sex scapegoating, also not allowed. Each public institution or higher education may continue that training that fosters a workplace and learning environment. However, they cannot do it unless they ensure that everybody is following the rules, is what this says. Institution diversity. All right, let's see what else we have. Race and sex stereotyping training. Each school district may continue training that fosters a workplace and learning environment that is respectful, as long as it doesn't touch on any of that prohibited conduct. We cannot prevent a school district from promoting racial, cultural, ethnic, intellectual, or academic diversity, provided such efforts are consistent. Okay, so they can. Yeah, so there are some pretty nice protections in here. It says this section shall not be construed to do the following: prevent a school district from promoting racial, cultural, ethnic, intellectual diversity. It's not about anti-diversity. It's not what this is about at all. They're saying, in fact, this section shall not be construed to do any of these: inhibit or violate First Amendment rights. Right. So now we're starting to take a look at the protections of the professor, of the teacher, of the academic environment. And of course, we want to foster that, right? I went to law school, and they talk a lot about diversity in law schools, and that it fosters all of this, rigorous debate, and that we have different perspectives in there. It felt like one perspective to me, that I was the problem with everything, of course. And we have liberty or death on here. He's going through the same thing right now. Prohibiting the discussing of specific defined concepts that are part of a larger course of academic instruction, right? So they're making some pretty strong limitations here as well. This was signed into law. Speaker of the House, Pat Grassley, Jake Chapman, President of the Senate, Megan Nelson, Chief Clerk, Kim Reynolds, the Governor, June 8th. So this is now in effect. And as I mentioned, I don't have children, and I don't know what the school situation is like right now. I think it's probably not ideal. What do we do about it? But I am a person, and I do need medical care from time to time. And could this concept be trickling over into that industry as well? Well, according to Breitbart, certainly looks like it. So they tell us that this individual, somebody who goes by the name of Donald Moss, right? Now, Dr. Donald Moss, we're going to take a look at this fellow here in a minute, but let's see what he wrote first. He's a doctor. He is somebody who is a current faculty member of the New York Psychoanalytic Institute. He's also a part of the San Francisco Center for Psychoanalysis. Well, he wrote a peer-reviewed article entitled On Having Whiteness, which is kind of this thing that the scholarly academics do. They write on something, like, on infinity, on morality, whatever. Okay. Very sophisticated. If you want to be sophisticated, write an article and start the title of the article with the word on. On the problem of hierarchical male structures. On that, right? Get started. Everybody goes, oh, this article is going to be impressive. I can't wait to read it. Can you wait to read this one? Probably. Let's take a look at what's going on here. So in this journal, he published this peer-reviewed article, which means somebody else read it and said, yeah, it's good. Publish it. And probably a bunch of people read it and said, yeah, it's good. Publish it. Love it. Get it in there. So the Healthcare Journal, this guy writes, whiteness is a malignant parasitic-like condition that creates perverse appetites. So, which is all news to me. I mean, I didn't know that I was a malignant parasite or that my whiteness was parasitic, but I'm going to learn more about that right now, thanks to this gentleman's brilliance. The article's abstract says that the condition of, quote, whiteness after one acquires it, I guess in the womb, gives a person a malignant parasitic-like condition to which white people have a particular susceptibility. All right. Well, I obviously don't want this parasite. So how can I deal with this, doctor? He says he added that the condition, while, quote, Being in one's body, in one's mind, and in one's world makes the host, I guess that's me, specifically target non-white people, due to their parasitic whiteness. Really? Okay. I haven't felt that. I haven't felt that much, but okay. He further writes, Moss writes, once established, these appetites are nearly impossible to eliminate. He went on to explain how a person could pursue treatment for the condition, which is great. All right, so if you happen to be white, let's figure out what we can do about this. He says effective treatment consists of a combination of psychic and social historical interventions. Psychic and social historical interventions. All right, well, okay, I'm not sure how to start with that, All right, it says such interventions can reasonably aim to only reshape whitenesses' infiltrated appetites to reduce their intensity, redistribute their aims, and occasionally turn those aims towards the work of reparations. Okay. Yeah, so I didn't know that I had a condition. I mean, I thought, I have it. It's there. I can feel it. I definitely do have that. So I guess, what do we do? So he's talking about reparations here. So that's good. So what about reparations? Maybe this will prompt that conversation, since all the white parasitics, malignant white people can talk reparations. And, to be fair about the reparations, I'd like to know what his offer is, or like what they're proposing here. What is how much are we talking? Okay, I've told you this before, but when I was on Clubhouse, they were talking about a big number in reparations. Now, I just kind of want to know what the number is. I'm just curious at what it is. If it's something reasonable, can we just kind of make this whole thing go away? If we pay, $1 billion, no more white supremacy in America anymore? You can't, that's it? The ledger is cleaned? What number is that? Now, the last I heard on Clubhouse, I think they were talking about 4 quadrillion, I think, which is 4 1,000 trillions, I think. So that one, I think, was not reasonable. You have to have a negotiating table. I'm just curious what that total number is for the reparations. I don't know if it's reasonable, maybe we can entertain it. If it solves this problem, for crying out loud. All right, Moss wrote that the ravages wreaked by the chronic condition can function either as a warning or as a temptation. The doctor said that memorialization alone, therefore, is no guarantee against regression. He says there is not yet a permanent cure for your whiteness. So if there's not a cure, you know what happens? They just send you off to the camps. One psychologist, Dr. Philip Pellegrino, commented on the article's publication, said, how do my colleagues consider this scholarship? Here's what she said, right? Or he said, Dr. Philip Pellegrino, how do my colleagues seriously consider this scholarship? Anyone actually take this seriously on having whiteness, right? Published by Donald Moss here. Here's what the abstract says from the article itself, first published May 27th. It says, whiteness is a condition one first acquires when one has a malignant, parasitic-like condition to which white people have a particular susceptibility. Condition is foundational, generating characteristics of being in one's body, in one's mind, and in one's world. Parasitic whiteness renders... Oh, sorry, one sec. All right. Once established, my device went off. Once established, these appetites are nearly impossible to eliminate. Effective treatment consists of a combination of psychic and social historical interventions. Such interventions can be reasonably aimed to reshape the whiteness's infiltrated appetites, to reduce their intensity, to redistribute their aims, and to occasionally turn those aims towards the work of reparation. When remembered and represented, the ravages wreaked by the chronic condition can function as a warning or as a temptation. There is not yet a permanent cure. So obviously, folks, this whole thing is insane. This guy's a lunatic, right? All of this talk is whacked out talk. Now, I was very jokey that last segment. I think this is reprehensible commentary. I think that this is disgusting to see out there in the world. And I think this guy should be ashamed of himself if he is serious. Now, the question is he serious, or is he just trolling everybody? We're starting to see a situation here where it kind of feels like they're trying to one-up each other almost just to show, just to get people riled up. And a lot of people are talking about this article today. I don't know if this guy actually believes it. I'd have, the rational person in me has to think that anybody in, academia would look at this and go, this guy's a lunatic, right? This is pure racism, right? People are born white. And we have a parasitic mind when we come out of the womb naturally. There's nothing we can do about that. That's insane racism. So why is he allowed to fester in academia? If these people are so enlightened and so holier than thou, and they are always following the science, why is he allowed to just bounce around, be on the board in New York and San Francisco? Probably elevated, right? Probably goes to the cocktail parties and everybody's like, oh, Dr. Donald Moss, thank you for being so insightful about how awful white people are. Tell us more of your trials and tribulations, doctor. Probably a lot of that going on. This is what the guy looks like here. So this is him from his Twitter, 644 followers. If this is his actual account, it looks like it is. 1,400 tweets here. It says the Dean, College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences, right? Which is what we talked about. Saybrook University, new book on self-care for chronic illness, integrative pathways, and Springer. So joined April 2009. Got to imagine this is the guy. And again, is he just trolling people? Like, is this a serious thing? Ordinarily, I would say this guy's just trolling, but I don't think so anymore. I think these people are actually dead serious, and I think this type of language is very serious, and it's very problematic. Joking aside, right? This guy's a doctor. He's writing all sorts of publications that other doctors are reading, been around for a long time, probably has quite a big following, probably has counseled and actually provided medical services to people. And I would love to know how many white people he's had counseling sessions with and what the long-term prognosis is for those people. Because I can imagine sitting there and being told that you're a parasite and that you're a malignant, awful contribution to human society is not good medical treatment. And is that something that, we have all of these American medical associations and all these watchdog groups that are supposed to be these enlightened academics and these scientists, and they allow this type of stuff to go on a regular basis. Is anything going to happen to this guy, right? This is a doctor who has a certain ideological opinion that he's trying to essentially pass off as a medical article, I guess. All right, so very frustrating stuff. Now, fortunately, folks, there is some sanity out there. I want to introduce you to this guy. He's a black Ivy League professor, and this article comes over from the Daily Wire. So he writes that a truly anti-racist parent must pull their kids from a school, any school that teaches CRT. Okay. His name is John McWhorter. He's a black Columbia University linguistics professor. He's urging parents who are truly anti-racist to pull their kids out of school. He talks about Dwight Englewood School. He references it as a DE school in response to an English teacher, Dana Stengel-Plow's decision to resign from the school over allegations that it is indoctrinating students with the Marxist theory. Right. So, I mean, major hats off to these people doing excellent work. Just saying, we're out of here. Right. And speaking out. Now, this guy writes, John McWhorter writes, all hail Dana Stengel-Plow. She's resigned from Dwight Englewood, which teaches students anti-racism that sees life as nothing but abuse of power and teaches that cringing hostile group identity against oppression is the essence of self. Truly anti-racist parents, in the name of the love of their kids, should pull them from Dwight Englewood School as of next fall. Only this will arrest the misguided elect parishioners and their quest to forge a new reality for us all. Here's what he posted on Twitter, right? So you can see, give him a good follow and a little bit of love if you're interested in doing so. But this is what he posted, and he actually wrote an entire letter here. So posted this at this organization called Fair for All, full letter. Not going to read the whole thing, but here's what you see. This is signed off on by Dana Stengel-Plow, right? Probably female, I guess, who is resigning, and she did so. Letter of resignation to Englewood, New Jersey, June 8th. Dear Joe, copies to everybody else, head of school, board, trustees, English department, everybody. Says, I became a teacher because I love people. DE has changed the way that it is. Today I'm resigning from a job I love because DE has changed in ways that undermine its mission and prevent me from holding true to my conscience as an educator. She said, I believe DE is failing our students. Over the past years, they've embraced an ideology that is damaging our students' intellectual and emotional growth. No chance of creating a true community among our diverse population. She says, I reject the hostile culture of conformity and fear that has taken hold of our school. The school's ideology requires students to see themselves not as individuals, but as representatives of a group, forcing them to adopt the status of privilege or victimhood. They must locate themselves within the oppressor or oppressed group or some intersectional middle where they must reckon with being a part oppressor and part victim. This theory of power hierarchies is only one way of seeing the world, yet it pervades the school as the single way of seeing the world. As a result, students come to my classroom accepting this theory as a fact, that people are born with less melanin in their skin, they are oppressors, and people born with more melanin in their skin are oppressed. Men are oppressors, women are oppressed, and so on. This is the dominant and divisive ideology that is guiding our students. We hear a lot about this, folks. She says, in my classroom, I see up close how this orthodoxy hinders students, their ability to read, write, and think. She says, I teach students who recoil from a poem because it was written by a man. I teach students who approach text in search of the oppressor. I teach students who see inequities in text that have nothing to do with power. Students have internalized the message that this is the way we read and think about the world. And as a result, they fixate on power and group identity. This fixation has stunted their ability to observe and engage with the full fabric of human experience. In our literature, talk about your life. She says, in my professional opinion, the school is failing to encourage healthy habits of mind, essential for growth, such as intellectual curiosity, humility, honesty, reason, the capacity to question ideas, and consider multiple perspectives. In our school, the opportunity to hear competing ideas is practically non-existent. How can students who accept a single ideology as fact learn to practice intellectual curiosity or humility, or consider a competing idea they've never encountered? How can students develop higher order thinking if they're limited to the world and looking at it through a lens of group identity and power? Sadly, the school is leading many to become true believers and outspoken purveyors of a regressive and illiberal orthodoxy. Understandably, these students have found comfort in their moral certainty, and so they become rigid and closed-minded, unable or unwilling to consider alternative perspectives. These young students have no idea that the school has placed ideological blinders on them. Of course, not all students are true believers. Many pretend to agree because of the pressure to conform. I've heard from students who want to ask a question but stop for fear of offending someone. I have heard from students who don't participate. One student did not want to develop her essay for fear that it might mean she's a racist. In her fear, she stopped from thinking. This is the very definition of self-censorship. I care deeply about our students. I've tried to introduce constructive and positive views. My efforts have fallen on deaf ears. You expressed dismay, but I did not hear any follow-up from you or your other administrators. Since then, the stifling conformity has only intensified. Last fall, 2 administrators informed faculty that certain viewpoints simply would not be tolerated during our new race-explicit conversations about our new anti-racist work. They said no one would be allowed to question the orthodoxy regarding systemic racism. The message was clear. The faculty went silent in response. The reality is that fear pervades the faculty. On at least 2 separate occasions, 17 and 18, our head of school, standing in front of the auditorium, told the entire faculty, quote, he would fire us all if he could so that he could replace us all with people of color. Can you believe that? Head of the school says, I'm going to fire you all if I could, and I'd replace you all with people of color. This year, administrators continue to assert DE's policy that we're hiring, quote, for diversity. DE has become a workplace that is hostile towards educators solely on their immutable traits. During a recent faculty meeting, teachers were segregated by skin color. Teachers were segregated by skin color at a recent faculty meeting. Teachers who had light skin were placed into the white caucus group, and they were asked to, quote, remember that we are white and that to take responsibility for our power and privilege. DE's racial segregation of educators aimed at leading us to rethink of ourselves as oppressors. It was regressive and it was demeaning to us as individuals with our own moral compass and human agency. Will the school force racial segregation on our students next? Says, I reject essentialist, racialist thinking about myself, my colleagues, and my students. As a humanist educator, I strive to create an inclusive classroom. By embracing the dignity, the unique personality of each and every student, I want to empower all students with the skills and habits of mind they need to fulfill their potential as learners and human beings. Neither the color of my skin nor the group identity assigned to me by my DE dictates my humanist beliefs or my work as an educator. Being told that it does is offensive and wrong. It violates my dignity as a human being. My conscience does not have a color. DE claims that we teach students how to think, not what to think. Sadly, that is just no longer true. I hope administrators and board members awaken in time to prevent this misguided absolutist ideology from hollowing out DE, as it has so many other institutions. Cheers to you, Dana Stangel Plow, upper school English teacher. And Dad, she's a good English teacher too. It's a nice letter. You know, I started to read that and I was like, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it was good. Pretty good letter. Woo. Actually would have slowed down a little bit had I known it would have been so dang good. Love it. So that was Dana Stengel-Plow. She's resigning. We have another professor saying, don't send your kids to that garbage school. They're trying to indoctrinate them. And that's what it's going to take, my friends. I mean, that's the only way to, I think, to address any of this stuff. Now, again, I don't have kids, so keep that in mind. All right, Want to Know says, you were right about local voting. My vote mattered a lot since only 25% voted. Some won, some lost, still run off school board elections in September in Oregon, some members within 50 votes. It definitely slowed CRT down. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. It's about running for these local boards. You know, here they did it at the governor's state level, but a lot of this, you're seeing people do this all across the country. You're seeing these videos come out on Twitter saying, stop teaching my kid that crap. I'm tired of it. And every one of them are pretty good. You know, these lately they've been moms, it looks like. And the moms come out and they have a really rehearsed speech and they just get their 3 minutes and they get jacked up and amped up, man, and they let it belt, let it fly. I'm like, yes, go, get it, love it. Love to see more of that, right? Tell these people, you know, they don't know any better. The problem is that people don't get engaged with their government. If more of us were engaged with our government, we'd see a lot less incompetence. But people have their lives to live, and they've got better things to do. The bureaucrats want to go run things, and those are exactly the wrong people to be running things, right? All right, we've got Shade says, California has CRT in schools, plus other horrid things. White children are literally told they are the problem. Just terrible things are being pushed onto them now. Why would you put your kids in school? I mean, honestly, you know, I feel terrible for parents that are listening to this and like, my kid's in public school. Uh-oh, you know, going, really? Like, I feel terrible that I have to come out here and do a show. I'm sure somebody's watching this with kids going, uh-oh, I have no choice but to send my kid to public schools. What do you do about that? I think, you know, as a parent, you just make sure when they come home, do a little deprogramming, as it were. All right, Speech Unleashed says, what needs to happen is for parents to be more involved in what is being taught to their children. With remote learning, parents finally started paying attention to local school boards. Parents need to continue doing this because indoctrination starts with the young. The quicker the parents do this, the quicker CRT is abolished in all sectors, including businesses. And I noticed that too, right? A lot of parents were sort of sitting in the same room with their kid on Zoom, and, you know, the kid's 12 years old, and a professor comes out and says, hey, you know, hey, racist little Susie over there, what are you doing with your white privilege? Get back over here and pay attention, okay? Right? And dad goes, what? What did they say? Tells mom. Mom goes down to the school board PTA meeting and lets it fly. Love it. Sharon Quinney says, juxtapose this comment with my previous one. Here, we see racial discrimination aimed primarily at whites, but including Jews and Asians as well. This is the core of CRT. All you have to do is connect the dots and take a backward look at Germany a little less than 100 years ago. Oh. So if you missed the first segment, Sharon's been here for the entirety of the show. We clipped these up into different segments. If you're only watching this segment, the first segment, we talked about Deutsche Bank and inflation. So she's taken us back to that story. Germany, rewind back 100 years. Deutsche Bank was founded in 1870. You know, we know where that went. Uh-oh. Not good there, Sharon. But it's an astute observation, that's for sure. Nadarb says, the problem is the left isn't using critical race theory as a theory. They are teaching people to use it as a general guideline. Yeah, it's critical race fact is how they're framing it, right? For everyday life. And that's why there is such a big problem, they say. It brings nothing but anxiety and paranoia to these young folks out here who buy into the lifestyle. Yeah. Yeah, they do. It's sort of fact. And I've been in conversations with people about this. They don't go very well. Actually, well, we're going to leave that one alone. Yeah, I was going to tell you what happened with one of those relationships, but don't want to get into that story. All right. Ed Green here says, critical race theory. How are these states' CRT bans going to enforce these bans? How will they monitor for compliance? What are the non-compliance consequences? We need laws to improve transparency in education so that parents and society know what kids are being taught. Indoctrination occurs behind closed doors. Yeah, it's a great point there, Ed. And I think this is probably, you're going to see a bunch of lawsuits around this. You know, all this stuff is going to go into effect, but, you know, at some point, somebody's going to file a lawsuit if they haven't already. And it's probably going to come down to enforcement, right? What happens if somebody starts talking about one of these concepts and a school administrator says, no, no, you crossed the line there. And they say, no, I didn't. The law says this, and I was talking about it in the bigger context. But I think racism is a part of that bigger context. And so I'm not, in fact, violating the law. I'm talking about something according to, my contract that I signed when I hired here, when I got my job as a teacher here, and my, rotten teachers union that's going to be fighting for me every step of the way. Then I have the freedom to go do these certain things, and I can run my curriculum my way. You already agreed to that. Now you pass this new law on top of an agreement we already made. We have a conflict of laws. I want to teach this according to my contract and the curriculum that I think is appropriate. The governor just slapped a new series of regulations on top of me. I'm going to go to my union that doesn't want me to work or teach the kids anyways because of COVID, and they're going to file a lawsuit probably with the ACLU. They're going to take that up, and then the courts are going to have to sort all of this out. So it's going to be a big mess is really what it's going to come down to. But I agree with your second point here that I think transparency is important. I think choice is important, right? If we had more choice, then who cares about what any particular school is teaching? Because you just say, hey, Johnny, what'd they teach you at school today? I learned that all white people are the problem. And you say, oh, well, that sounds terrible. That's not reality. So Johnny, I'm going to take you out of school A. We're going right over there to school B. And guess what? That happens pretty quickly. Suddenly school A says, yeah, that's really not in alignment with what our community wants. So we just sort of use competition and say, well, that curriculum is in alignment with my religion, with my values, my ideals, and I'm going to move my children over there. But we don't have that right now. So now we have a situation where the governor really has no choice but to come down and implement a blanket policy that slaps everybody down. And I don't necessarily like that, right? I'm not somebody who thinks that the government should be telling us what to do one way or the other. If one parent wants to send their kid to a CRT school and they want to indoctrinate that kid and think that that's the best methodology for that kid in America, go for it. I totally disagree with that. I think that this entire concept really, hamstrings kids. And I've talked about this before. It breaks my heart thinking about, 8-year-olds waking up thinking that every moment that they're walking around the mall or the park or Disneyland, that they are in this environment where they are the victims, and that every single white person, who's in that Mickey costume? Is that a white guy or a black guy, right? Am I going to get attacked by Mickey, or should I give him a hug? Because of what they are teaching people. Like, what a horrible world to live in. Way to rob a 12-year-old or 14-year-old of any enjoyable, facet of life by just telling them that they are a victim at the first step. And you think about this just with kids in general or people in general. If you tell somebody that they're terrible at everything, that they're a victim, that everything is oppressive to them, they're going to start acting in conformity with that position, right? With that belief. And it just makes it impossible for them to succeed, which is a huge problem. That's why we tell kids, you can be president, you can be an astronaut, you can fly to the moon if you want to, do whatever, you have skills, you can achieve great things in this world. And nobody can stop you, little Johnny. Work hard, do well, don't do drugs, stay in school. You'll have some success in America. But now we turn around to little Johnny and say, oh no, you're a huge part of the problem. Everything that you're doing here is oppressive. And we tell, the non-white kid that they're the victim of all of Johnny's actions. And you just go, all right, so if we had a choice, we just say, we're pulling our kids out of that school. They're going to a better school. You can wither away and die. All right. Want to Know says there is a lot of the Bernie philosophy out there. It's in Florida and Texas. My mom calls it the ME generation. What can you do for me? I like that. Yeah, so it's not like millennials. It's like the me generation. I like that. We have I'm Not Gas says, I've never seen a parasitic species that hosts specifically seek out to live among. Yeah, it's kind of, it is weird. Yeah, it is weird, right? So I was trying to sort of tease this out a little bit. It's really complicated because there's I think a lot of unity between these two things. Like I actually see black people and white people getting along together from time to time. It's a bizarre scene. I mean, if you've never seen it, wow. It actually happens in America regularly. People go to business meetings, they go to lunch, they're not killing each other in racial animosity in this country. I know it's hard to believe that, but it actually does happen. And so I'm trying to sort of conflate the two. If white people are such parasitic, malignant monsters, why are we getting along so well if we're just leeching off of all of the energy of the host? I don't know. It's confusing, but I'm not a medical doctor. He is. I'm a juris doctor, which is obviously not qualified to opine on anything involving racism in America, especially because I'm white as well. It's a huge problem. Huge problem. Want to know says, how do you cure this condition? Give them everything you own. Would that do it? Or should one borrow to get more money to give them? Well, that's what I want to know. I mean, I just want to know what the number is. Not because I think that we should, do reparations. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just curious, right? Sometimes you go on the website and you look up that car, you're like, whoa, okay, maybe that is doable, actually. Maybe I can make that work. I just like to know, right? What does that trip cost? Okay, that's pretty reasonable. If you can knock that down a little bit, then maybe we can make this work. So I'm just curious what the reparations number is. And quite frankly, I'm not really sure who to talk to about that. If I knew who to talk to and who was responsible for that decision, maybe we could get a head start on this. Is it Obama? Is it Al Sharpton? Is it the George Floyd family? I don't know who to talk to about any of these issues, but I'm open to the conversation. I'm a problem-oriented, I'm a problem-solution-oriented person. It's been a long week, folks. Sharon says, okay, and you can put this down with the other two. This is the same rhetoric and even vocabulary used by dear Uncle A.H. in the last century. Oh, no. Oh, no, Uncle A.H. We're talking about Deutsche Bank. We're talking about indoctrination. We're talking about Uncle A.H. Oh, gosh, the show. It's going. We're snowballing fast, my friends. All right, Jeremy here says, in my opinion, racism is a perverse, man-made behavior, and the people pushing anti-white is no better than anyone else. There is one race, the human race. CRT is perpetuating racism, not making it better. Honestly, I don't think this guy deserves much attention. He's clearly out of his mind. That's a good point, Jeremy. Yeah, he might just be crazy, right? It might just be crazy old, what was it? Moss. Crazy old Dr. Moss. He's just writing in there again. Are you going to publish? Remember in The Office where they give Creed Bratton the Creed thoughts? They just set up a Word file and they're like, here's your blog. Just put everything into this Word file on your computer so the internet doesn't see it. Maybe that's what they're doing with Dr. Moss, except this one got out and we're all reading it. Sharon says, he is not trolling. Just look at that number with the hate speech at Yale the other day. That person with the hate speech, yeah. There are a number of other examples that have cropped up lately. Moss needs to lose his license. Where is the class action lawsuit? Yeah, where is the AMA? Where is the American Medical Association? This guy is actually telling people that they are parasites. Is that clinical psychology? I'm not a psychologist, but is that in the DSM-5 that they use for clinical diagnoses? Whiteness, parasitic, malignant condition? Is he following, accepted medical practice? I don't think so, but I don't know. Who knows? It's very, very complicated. Tremendous is here, says this kind of nonsense makes no sense to me. If you're trying to improve race relations by telling people you're trying to convince things need to improve, that they're evil, doesn't work. It makes me feel like, okay, I'm evil, so there's no hope for me because it's my whiteness that makes me evil. So why even try to improve? What's the point? You can't get rid of it. It's still there. I'm stuck with it. Probably. I don't know if we can change that in the near future. Not that I would want to, not that anybody should want to, because I don't think it's a problem. All right. Now, Jeremy says, I think this guy has been given too many titles and become self-important and uncontested for so long, he believes the garbage he's coming up with. A similar phenomenon is when you think you are a great singer and everyone tells you that you're good. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good analogy there, Jeremy. And I think also that, this type of stuff, it's like Britney Spears. Okay. Now, not anything recent, because that's a whole separate can of worms that we're not getting into. But remember when she was sort of young and a teenager? Remember she was always kind of doing like one outrageous thing after another? I was a kid. I was like, in love with her. And every time she did something crazy, it was like always a little bit more crazy than the last time. We see this with a lot of celebrities and a lot of people in general. They want to get attention. And so they're constantly escalating their rhetoric because everybody's tired of your old shtick. We already heard your speech on white privilege. Okay. Everybody's saying white privilege now. So we get that. That's boring. It's bland. There's books about it. We've heard it enough. So this guy goes, I need to come up with something. I know. Parasites. Malignant parasites. That's the ticket. I'm going to write a whole paper about it. Watch what this does to the internet. Right? So it could be something like that. Edon Tess says, how do we calculate reparations to people who are not directly harmed? That's a good question. He says, if we are using the original promise of 40 acres and a mule, okay, we can calculate this, which is, oh gosh, I'm liking where this is going. In 1862, there were between 20,000 and 50,000 slaves freed. Take the most favorable number of 50,000. Okay, so 50,000 times 40 acres. So we'll say a 2 million an acre times an average of 947 an acre, which is 18,940 million. You'll have Faith calculate the cost of a mule. There you go, solved. So my math was all over the place, but hard to research and write in here in real time. Mule in 1867 is 6697, so times 50,000, so it's 3.3 million. Grand total 22 million. Okay, so that's a great number, by the way. Thank you for that. And so now so that sounds like that might be an 1867 number. So now let's add that up to it. Like, let's adjust that for inflation, and we can add in some punitive damages if you want. So 22 million, let's say 22 million in 1867. Let's say inflation was, 3-4 times that. So we're going to multiply that by 4. Gives us about $100 million bucks. Let's add another punitive damages of another $100 million bucks. $200 million? Folks, that's like a rounding error. That's like tip money. They spend that in toilet paper in a month in Congress. A lot of excrement there. So sounds like it's pretty doable, according to Edon Tess. Now, that's a different number than what I had heard previously. So there was another room in Clubhouse about 4 months ago where they were talking about the reparations number. They were having a serious conversation about this. And their numbers were a little bit different. You're about 22 million. There was number that was about 4 quadrillion, which I think is for 1,000 trillions, which is a lot. So we've got a little bit of room to make up here, 22 million, 4 quadrillion, but it's a start. That's all I was looking for. So thank you for that. Speech Unleashed says, resignation is the wrong strategy to change things, to be honest. These teachers need to use the same tactics that are used against them. They need to say they are being forced to teach CTR is discrimination against them. And that's a good point, actually, Speech. I think that's a very pertinent point, right? The teachers here, I think, are at a major disadvantage because it is a David versus Goliath situation. They have the schools, which are obviously indoctrinated. They want to go one particular direction. They're ideological. They're not educational anymore. They have a particular outcome in mind. They want to see society changed. They're going to be a part of that revolution by teaching the students. They know that they have them captive and they can do essentially whatever they want with them because most parents are just out to lunch, right? They are doing whatever they think is best for them and their families, and they're trusting that the government is taking care of their children. Unfortunately, they don't know what's really going on. So if we're in a situation like this where you have the entire school industry, and then you have the teachers who are all beholden to a union, and the union now is going to essentially do what doesn't jeopardize their continual position. The majority of teachers, it sounds like, are sort of going in this direction, or at least accepting it. And so the unions are not going to fight for the teachers who are resigning in protest. The unions will back the teachers who maybe would get terminated if they didn't follow the CRT teachings, but not the people, or maybe this woman doesn't have a union. Maybe this is a private school and this is a whole separate issue. But my point still stands, I think, that if a teacher is not going to go in lockstep, they're going to be out on their own. So what are they supposed to do? In my opinion, I think a real good solution would be somebody starts a legal fund for these people, right? And she does exactly what you said. She sticks by her guns. She says, I'm not teaching that garbage. And if you want me to go and participate in this segregation faculty meeting and you want to call me somebody who's a part of the White Caucus, I'm not participating. What you're doing is discriminatory. It's in violation of the Civil Rights Act. It's racial discrimination. It's sex discrimination. And I'm not standing for it. And I'm going to continue to work, force you to fire me, which they will inevitably do. Then they'll get slapped with a lawsuit, right? But the teachers need to have a lot of funds, a lot of resources and expertise in order to do that, which, I think that is probably beyond most of them. And if I were somebody who practiced in civil law, and, had more experience in that space and employment law and, teachers unions and government contracts and all that stuff, maybe that would be a project I'd be interested in. But I'm sure that there are other lawyers out there who would be interested in spearheading something like that, or at least doing work on this, because that is different. Resigning is sort of ceding the ground to them. Filing a lawsuit is a whole different ballgame. And I think as these conversations continue to develop, we're going to see more and more of that. We're seeing people with a lot of funding, like Project Veritas. I think he's backed by the Mercers or somebody like that, billionaires who just say, here, whatever you need, just go continue to fight your war. Go, right? You need $1 million for a lawsuit against the New York Times? No problem. Here you go. Go get it, right? Because they're going to get it on the back end in fundraising and political victories that will then trickle back down to their benefit. So love the idea of using litigation to take the stands when the stands are appropriate, not to be, filing frivolous lawsuits by any stretch of the imagination, but stuff that is legally right and morally appropriate, I think would be the right tactic. All right, next up, we got No Doubt says the parents of one Texas school district submitted a FOIA request to the district on CRT materials that were taught and then used the results to flip the school board in the next election. I think I saw that story. Don't think we covered that here, No Doubt, but I did see that story. And there was another story where the parents, I think, seized the school board because they knew the Roberts Rules of Orders for meetings. So what happened was, I think that they were going to come and protest, something. And the school board said, oh, we're just not holding a meeting then, right? We're not going to show up. So the school board didn't show up, just sort of abandoned ship because they knew that they were going to get scolded by all these parents. Well, the people there said, well, today's the time and place for the meeting. It's a scheduled meeting. It's a stated meeting. It's supposed to happen at this time. There's nobody here. So the rules say when nobody's here, we get to just kind of vote on people who are going to come in and fill their seats. Let's do it. Voted everybody in. They took the seats, elected themselves, threw out the old board, passed anti-CRT legislation. I think that was the gist of an article I read, which is hilarious. It's just great. We have Davis Park says, is segregating professors by race unconstitutional by the Brown versus Board precedent? I don't get how this works. I don't either, man. I don't know. I thought we had all of these rules in place that you can't do that type of stuff, right? We used to have the white people get that drinking fountain and the black people got that drinking fountain. You got to sit over here when you're waiting for your tire to get changed, and you get to sit over here. But, that was separate but equal. Remember that whole system that we went through in this country that our Supreme Court said originally that's okay and then not so good anymore. And now we're sort of going back to that. So I don't get it either, my friend. Brown versus Board precedent. I don't know if they could. I don't know if they could do that for their own faculty. Those are. It's a whole separate. It's a whole separate can of worms. Like this is an employment situation now between an employee and an employer. And in my opinion, it's probably going to be closer to, employment discrimination or something. The whole thing is ripe for a lot of litigation. We talked about Iowa passing this new bill. They're going to be faced with a ton of lawsuits, and they know that going into this, I'm sure. All right, next up, No Doubt says reparations have already been paid through the Civil Rights Act and affirmative action programs of the 1960s, and they continue through today. I think you could easily make that argument, right? We do have a very, very robust social welfare state in this country. I think you can make the argument for that, but I don't think that's quite what the pro-reparations people are looking for. All right, next up, we've got Nadarb says, if I was a parent, I would be demanding a live stream of every single one of my kids' classes every day so that I could access and check in throughout the day. I think that's probably something more parents are interested in. Speech says taxes pay for public school education system. Taxes should not be used to pay for teaching discrimination like CRT. So absolutely no public school should be allowed to teach CRT. If private schools wants to, then you can argue they should be allowed to, but not with the school, not with taxpayer dollars. Yeah. Or if you're going to use taxpayer dollars, let's say to support the students, you give them the choice, right? So like if we're going to give everybody here $1,000 for your kids' education, go do whatever you want with that. Yeah, I have to think about that. All right. So next up, we got Pinky says, Rob, you don't have a condition. The corruption in this world runs deep. Thanks, Pinky. I'm looking at you here. You don't have a condition either, dear. You are beautiful just the way you are, as is everybody. This racism is garbage. It's just garbage. And I think it's ultimately going to be seen for what it is. I think long term, this type of ideology, living this way, living like you are a constant victim, living like you are being oppressed everywhere you go, and living like you are an oppressor, they mute you. Just that's really what this is all about. It just mutes everybody. And it makes people more volatile and more angry against each other. And that is not a good way to live your life. Those people are not going to be effective. And it's sad for them. It's sad for those kids who are going through that world, going through that education. They're going to be less effective as people, less effective as business owners, as doctors, as lawyers, astronauts, presidents, or whatever they decide to do, whether it's welders and plumbing and teaching and all of these other professions that are outstanding. But they don't function if every time you walk into your classroom, or every time when I was digging ditches, I go out there and I work with my colleagues, many of whom were not white. We don't go out there digging ditches in 116 degrees, screaming at each other over about our origins and about who should swing the pick harder than the next guy, and about why I should take over their bird. It doesn't work like that, right? So if I show up on that job site and I start, talking victim, oppressor, oppressee, all this garbage, do you know what happens at that job site? Everybody goes, "You're whacked, bro. We're not going to work with you." And that person gets rooted out of the system. They're going to see a lot of failures time and time again, living in that ideology, or they're only going to succeed in their own silo that lives and or operates that way. Okay, the productive people in society, even if this stuff is being taught in schools, even if the government is cramming this down your throats, the people who really are the gears of the world, they're not going to accept that. So, let them have their little fun over there in their little bizarre world where everything is racist and everything is broken. The other people who really want to live our lives and go find some purpose and create a mission and go and achieve that and believe that we can do something great on this planet with our time here, we're going to go over here. They, the CRT people, they can go spend time over there with themselves and just bicker about who the bigger victim is. I don't want a part of it. I know you don't either, which is why you're here, and you're there at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And we love you. We love your support. Thank you so much for it.